You're probably thinking, wow, she must write some sort of high fantasy. No, I don't. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Tiana, or Tiana, which is with a J, and today I'm really excited to talk about my writing projects. So yes, I am a writer. That's why I started this channel. It's why I started my podcast. I've been watching WriterTube, AuthorTube for probably the last 2 years or so, and so I've decided to take the leap and make my own channel. And so what better way to start off than talk about my own writing projects. I am definitely somebody who bounces between a lot of projects. I have about 10 of them that are in various different stages, and I'm going to go through every single one. A little bit about me as a writer is that I would definitely say that I'm an overwriter if my very first manuscript is any indication of that. I'll go more into that later. I also would call myself a plantser. So I'm not a super detailed planner in that I need to have everything figured out before I can start writing, but I also I've never gone into a writing project not having any idea of what's going to happen. Usually how it works for me is when I get an idea, I tend to get more of an actual story idea versus characters. Like my best friend Anna New, she's here on YouTube. If you haven't watched her, you should go check her out. She says that she tends to get more of an idea for a character and then she starts writing the story. I'd say I'm kind of the opposite. I have an idea and I'm trying to make characters to fit that idea. And usually I actually tend to see the beginning and the ending of my projects with a few scenes in between, and then my job with writing is literally to piece all of that together. That's kind of how my writing process goes. And so that's how my first novel started, which is this beauty right here. This is my very first completed manuscript. It's as long as it looks. It's this is the first ever draft. It's sitting at just under 160,000 words. And you're probably thinking, wow, she must write some sort of high fantasy. No, I don't. This is actually a mafia romance novel. And the way it started is in, I want to say 2018. 2018, I got super into mafia romance, and into 2019, I read, I think, everything in the genre. Everything that was out at that time, I read all of it. I was inhaling mafia romance books, and after a certain point, I got very bored of the genre, and for me, this project literally was the whole, you have to write the book that you want to read. That's kind of what happened for me. So there were 2 series in the mafia romance genre that I really enjoyed compared to a lot of other ones. And so I was asking myself what stuck out to me in those 2 series versus all the other ones that I was either bored with or a few that I didn't even finish. And I realized what sorts of, let's say, tropes per se, or what sort of characters were in those books that I enjoyed. And so I decided to, take the plunge and write a book. And that's how this project, which I realized I didn't even tell you what it's called, this is Project t.o.d. t.o.d is just the acronym for what the potential title is going to be, which I'm not going to reveal yet, but that's literally how this project was born. So in April 2019, when I was still a university student, I started jotting so many notes about what I wanted this project to be, and the initial idea actually it started off differently than how it ends up being now. But what this project now is actually about, it's It's a project about a girl named Elena, and Elena's mother is murdered, actually. And so what she does is she enlists the help of the Italian mafia to help her find out who killed her mother. And this is set in modern day Chicago. And throughout this whole process of looking for her mother's killer, she herself ends up becoming a ruthless mob queen. And as she's living this mafia lifestyle and searching for her mother's killer, she ends up finding out a lot of secrets about her own past and, of course, what actually did lead to her mother's murder. And so that's what happens in book one. As to why it's 160,000 words, I'm an overwriter, like I said. I did actually have my mentor read this, and I asked him if it was too long, and he actually said that for the length, like the story makes sense, like how I wrote it and everything. Obviously I'm doing edits right now and I'm working on cutting back things. This was my first ever fully written novel. As I've been reading through it, I see that there are big chunks that I can cut out. I actually really started writing this during NaNoWriMo in 2021 when I wrote 60,500 words. And I realized that when I would first start writing, sometimes like the first 500 words would be like a warm-up for me. It would be like 2 or 3 paragraphs of me just, writing all this fluff. And then it was kind of like, okay, let me get into writing, and then came like the actual good parts. So I've been able to, as I've been editing and reading through this, is see exactly, okay, yeah, I can cut out, let's say, these 500 words here. So I think hopefully it will be not 160,000 words, but I don't see it being below 100,000, which I know is above the typical word count for this genre. But it's a very big story, and so big, in fact, that I actually, this is supposed to be a trilogy, so there's a second book after this that I have started, which is sitting at around 13,000 words, and then there's the third book, which is so far off in my mind that I literally barely have an idea for it. But I think I've written maybe the first handful of paragraphs, and you'll see that this is a theme with me. I tend to jump around on projects and then I start a new one, and this is why, 4 years later, 3.5, I don't even want to count because it's been so long since I started this that it's taking forever to get done, and I need to really get on my stuff to finish this. That's Project t.o.d, and it's going to be pretty dark. It's going to involve, lots of violence, lots of murder, but I really want to explore Elena's transformation as a normal girl to, becoming a killer herself, in exploring how far somebody is willing to go to seek revenge for what they believe is a justified cause. In her case, somebody murdered her mother, and she's willing to do whatever it takes to find out who did it and enact her revenge on them. And so I really wanted to explore that. But I guess the thing that really started this project too is that what really bothered me about some of the mafia romance books is that the main female character was a lot of the times this very weak, docile, almost infantile little girl. Like you've got the stereotypical dominant mob guy, and that's great. I love that. I love that very much. But I realized I didn't like this girl who just, followed him around like a puppy. He said do this, she does that. She tries to fight him off a little bit, but in the end, she ends up just doing whatever he wants. And then a lot of justification for a lot of his bad behavior. So in a few of them, he would cheat and she just forgives him, and that's just what mob life's. I hate the cheating trope. I'm so anti-cheating that no, I can't do that. So I actually did not finish books that had that sort of trope in it, and I like my female characters to have a little bit more personality. I want them to be girls who are not just going to take everything sitting down. And that really is what led to the birth of Elena, is rather than her sitting around and being sad and moping, for eternity waiting for the police to figure out who killed her mother, which they never do. That's not a spoiler, but they don't. She was like, screw this, I'm gonna go find out who killed my mom, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to figure that out. And so that's how this story was born, and I realized that that's kind of those are the sorts of characters that I want to write. So as I tell you about my next few projects, you'll see that I don't actually stick to one genre. I don't want to. I also don't think I can, because as I get all my writing ideas, they're all like wildly different genres. They're all wildly different stories. But I realize that the sort of stories that I'd like to tell are those that they explore the human experience, is the way that I've always thought about it. I consider writing an exploration of what it means to be alive. And so I do want to explore, what does it take to become a killer? What does it take to survive in a dystopian world? Some of these concepts that are difficult to, like, most people don't even think about them, I suppose. And I just want to question, I want to leave the reader, wondering, would they do the same thing if they were in the same situation? How far would the reader be willing to go in the same place as my character, And maybe they're going to hate them because, like with Elena, they're just going to say, oh, she should have just gotten over it. She should have just accepted the fact that her mother's dead. Normal people don't go off and, seek revenge. That's fair. But, if you had the ability to do that, would you? So these are the sorts of things that I'm looking more to explore in my novels versus just sticking in one genre. And so that brings us to the next project, which I've talked about on my Instagram. It's been my nano project for the last 2 years, and that's project e.l.y or i.l.y. And this project is a sci-fi dystopian social commentary, is the best way that I would describe it. So essentially, I got the idea for this project while I was working on this project during my first nano, and I started getting this idea for a dystopian society that, well, it's a dystopian society, but it's built like a utopia that's run by an AI system called the e.l.y. And as I've been thinking about the ever-growing presence of AI in our society, I wanted to kind of extrapolate from that and see what would it be like if we actually lived in a society that is fully governed by an AI system. Like, there's still human interaction in the system and how it runs, but essentially everything's determined by AI. And so I've taken concepts that are literally happening in the world around us, and I've just tried to make it so that these things are now normal in the world. So, for example, Elon Musk is working on Neuralink, which is supposed to be a, implant in the brain, and essentially would be like a computer chip that can record our thoughts, our emotions, and basically truly bridge the gap between a human and technology. And so that's totally normal in my novel. Like, we've already reached that point where everyone has a brain implant and they fully interact with it. It's totally normal. Everyone gets one at birth. I've taken aspects of the social credit system that is currently active in China, and I've implemented that into my society. Totally normal thing, you know, trying to get places, everything's governed by a social rating score. And then there's certain concepts in society today about transhumanism and about biology and things like that. And I've tried to extrapolate my thoughts about what could happen and make them totally normal in this city. And so what happens is that my main character, Jade, she's born in this city, which is divided into 3 districts. She's born in a district called Bellum, and she, you know, lives her life fully integrated with this AI system and lives her life like normal until one day she encounters a rebel who is not affected by the AI system. And so she becomes intrigued, and, you know, it's her first time meeting someone who is not affected by the system. And so she approaches this rebel, and whose name is Gemma, actually ends up taking her outside of the city to a little camp. It's not even a camp, it's more like a full-blown settlement, let's say, outside of the city limits, where there's a group of people that are all living not connected to the AI system. And so that starts off Jade's journey into, you know, truly understanding what sort of society that she's living in, because she's never lived in a society outside of not being in this AI governed system. And so she starts to see the differences between, let's say, normal life as we're used to it now and her fully technologically advanced society. And so it's really like a commentary on my ideas of how I think things would happen if we lived in that sort of society, and I kind of turn it into, let's say, the worst things. Again, it's a utopia, but it's really a dystopia when you look at it. So that is Project e.l.y. So the next project after that, this is a relatively new project. I got this idea back in, I want to say November, December? I can't even remember at this point. But it's called Project Circus. And Project Circus is, I mean, kind of what it sounds like. It is about a circus. If anything, it's actually, I want it to be like a good old-fashioned freak show, like back as they had in the 1800s and the 1900s. Last year, I went to Vegas and I saw 2 Cirque du Soleil shows. I saw Ka, and I saw, I think, the one with all the water and the dive tank and everything. And it was so cool. Like, it was so cool to see all the acrobatics and everything. Ka has more of an actual storyline, but I'll be honest, they kind of lost the plot. Like, they obviously don't talk during the show, but I definitely was kind of lost about halfway through about what exactly, who was who and what the story was. But, I mean, the actual acrobatics and the stage and everything and what they were doing, phenomenal. And is just more of an actual, it's just more like acrobatics in the water and everything, not so much story. But I remember thinking to myself after that, I was like, man, I would love to just see like crazy stuff like they had back in the day. So it's just like people sword swallowing and like Siamese twins that are, I don't know, doing something, and, you know, people like on doing dangerous trapeze acts. Like I just felt like, I feel like so many things now today are like muted down compared to how they were before. Obviously, I know safety plays a role in all of that and everything, and making things PC, sure, great. But then Project Circus came along, and I was like, I want to write like a good old-fashioned freak show. But the thing is that this freak show is going to be based on the 7 deadly sins. And so every single circus act is going to be linking back to the 7 deadly sins. And then in my true writer style, I suppose, I'm going to be incorporating the reader in a way in which I want them to, again, question would they do certain things if they were in this scenario. And that's my intent with that project. The next project is one that pretty much nobody knows about, so this is like the first time I'm really telling anybody about it, and I'm going to say very little about it. This is a project that I would like to actually like put myself in some of the same scenarios that I would like to write about. It's going to involve so much research on my end, because I basically want to incorporate real world events that have happened, but obviously like add a fictional twist to them. And so that project is, the mood board for this is going to be, the first book is going to be, it's called Project K and M, for lack of a better term right now for it, and then the second book would be Project Druid. And so basically in the first book, it would be that my main character, who doesn't even have a name yet, this is what I mean, like I do more idea writing versus like starting from an idea versus starting from a character. So the main character, she is basically in the middle of a geopolitical underground war that she started. Let's just leave it at that. And so the first book is basically her going and fighting in this underground war that's taking place between two ethnic groups. And so obviously she's on the side of her own ethnic group. The enemy is the other ethnic group. And so this was actually only supposed to be Project K&M. I actually never envisioned a second novel for it, Project Druid. It just happened that last month, so December, I got ideas for Project Druid based off of my own things that happened in my life. Like I just was going through something, and then I was thinking about it, and kind of when something happens to you and you start thinking about the scenarios and like, oh, if I could control this is what I would do, or what I would say, or I wish this happened. So it kind of started like that. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like I could take my envisioned ending of Project K&M and use like what I'm visualizing right now to be the beginning of Project Druid. And so that's basically what I did, is that Project Druid kind of came out of nowhere, and I just almost have the first 2 chapters done. It's probably sitting at like just under 6,000 words. Whereas Project K&M, I haven't even actually really started writing it. I maybe have like 4 paragraphs, and then I have a giant brain dump document. And so I'm going back and forth between them. I don't even know when I'm gonna finish writing them. I feel like they're years and years and years away, but they're, eventually I want to get to writing them. And then within that same world is Project R&J. And so Project R&J, what it's supposed to be is it's set within the same world as where Project K&M and Project Druid are going to be in. But my idea with R&J is that it's not going to feature the same characters from the other 2 projects. It's going to feature 2 completely new characters, and the whole point is that, in a war, you're going to have people who are actually fighting the war, the soldiers, those that are politically involved and everything. So they're kind of, let's say, the front lines. But obviously, during times of war, there's also just normal, everyday civilians who are trying to live life as normal. And so Project R&J is actually the only love story that I have in mind for writing. I'm really not a romance writer. But it's supposed to be 2 teenagers who fall in love, and they're actually from the opposite ethnic groups. So the 2 ethnic groups that are fighting each other, these 2 teenagers are from ones from each ethnic group. Obviously that causes a lot of problems for them because there's an underground war happening, there's a lot of political tension between these two ethnic groups, and so their love story is a bit of a forbidden love story, but it's just, this exploration of, two kids who fall in love and are trying to navigate first love while also, it being forbidden and, everyone saying that they're not allowed to be together. But then also I wanted to explore, like, with everything that's going on in the world, like, how far are we willing to go with war? How far are we willing to prevent people from being together and let things divide us? And so that's what that story is about. And it does take some inspiration from some already other published works, but it's going to be entirely my own story. Okay, then I have ideas for 2 non-fiction projects. This is, like I said, I'm not gonna stick to one genre. That's never gonna happen. Like, I have so many things I'd like to say and so many types of stories that I'd like to explore that me sticking to one genre is literally never going to happen, I don't think. I think the only thing that I can guarantee is, like my friend Gabe was saying, like when we were talking about this, is I think I'm gonna be more known for, rather, like, let's say the types of themes that I explore, or the types of, like, situations that characters are put in, versus, writing only mafia romance or only dystopian. Like, I don't see myself doing that, and I don't think I can, nor do I think I should. So I'm just gonna write whatever the hell I want. That's essentially my writing goal. But my 2 nonfiction projects are, one of them is based off of when I went into the jungle. So April 2022, I went to the Amazon jungle for the first time, and I absolutely loved it. I've always wanted to go to the jungle, and I was there for a week. It was absolutely amazing. Like, I did a guided tour and everything, so I was very much living there like a tourist, but I was deep in the heart of the jungle at a lodge during rainy season. Like, I waded through chest deep water. I had a tarantula on my face. I'll put a picture. I ate some sort of weird bug thing. Oh, I had capybara meat as well. Like, I went fishing for piranhas. I literally, one of the craziest, coolest, best things I've ever done. 10 out of 10, I recommend you go to the jungle. But obviously while I was there, I got to meet people who live in the jungle. Like, they're born and raised there. They live deep in the heart of like middle of nowhere. They've never left. Like, that's just what they do. Their normal life is living in the middle of the jungle. And so, I loved talking to people in what limited ways I could. I mean, they all speak Spanish, or they speak tribal languages. So one of the tribal languages that I got to hear was e.l.y. And so it was obviously communicating with people was a little bit difficult because I speak English. My Spanish is extremely limited, and my e.l.y. is non-existent. So I would love to go back and live in the jungle for a longer time and just spend time there because I loved it so much, but I want to collect the stories of people that live there. I think there's just so many things that, ways of life that are there, and the tribes that live there, and things that are happening that so many people don't know about, and I want to hear it firsthand and then share those firsthand stories. But I also want to talk about, like, my own experience, like, what is it like for me as just someone who grew up in Canada and, traveled all over the world, and I have my Serbian heritage, but then I just go and I live in the jungle, which is completely unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, and kind of, it would be this back and forth about, like, my own experience, but then also, like, the stories of these people of whose normal life is the jungle. And so that would be the first nonfiction project. And the second nonfiction project is then, it's literally just I want to explore more about Serbian history and culture and heritage, and so I want to travel around Serbia and same thing, collect stories, talk about my own experiences and stories. Serbian culture is not as well known about as a lot of other cultures. There's obviously some negative connotations as well after former Yugoslavia fell apart and Serbia was bombed in 1999 for 78 days straight. So there's a really rich history and culture here that most people don't know about, especially they don't know anything farther than Yugoslavia or potentially perhaps beyond before World War One. I think like most people can't even place Serbia on a map, to be honest. So it's in southeastern Europe, by the way. So I just really want to, talk about that, and because my own Serbian culture and heritage actually does influence so much of my writing. It may not be entirely obvious right now based off of the projects that I've talked about, but it absolutely does. And it's also very important for me that people know that I'm a Serbian writer. Yes, I'm Canadian as well, but I'm Serbian. My parents are both Serbian. They just happened to immigrate during the war, and so everything really about me is Serbian. So it's very important for me that if I ever become published, and if anybody ever knows about me, that all of this, whatever I end up doing, came from a Serb. And so that's why I want to write that project. And the last, let's say, actual writing project, like I said, there's so many of them, is a short story. It's the only short story that I have in mind right now. I don't really have a name for it. As you'll see, some of these projects have names, some of them don't. So this one, I don't even know how I got the idea for it, probably like a year and a half ago. And essentially, this is maybe the closest project I have to fantasy. I don't really tend to write fantasy either because I don't even read fantasy, to be honest. I'm not really... I've read low fantasy, like when vampires were all the rage. Oh, I was all over Twilight, Vampire Diaries, bunch of other series that I don't even remember right now. But high fantasy was never really a big interest of mine. And so I have no intention to write about it either, simply because I don't have an interest in it. But this project, basically, it's a princess who lives in a palace, but she is not allowed to show her face. So she's always wearing like a veil, or she's wearing jewelry that covers most of her face, if not all of her face. And one day, her mother appears to her, but her mother is apparently actually a goddess. And her mother comes to warn her that an assassin is coming after her to kill her, and so she has to flee the palace. And so she does, and for the first time in her life, she's actually allowed to show her face, because nobody actually knows what this girl looks like, right? She's always, only a few of her ladies in waiting actually know what she looks like, but almost no one in the palace does, the subjects in the kingdom, none of them actually know what she looks like. And so she's out in public for the first time with her face showing. And then as she's, going on her own journey for the first time away from the palace, she meets someone, a fellow traveler, and, he's going on his own adventure. But then, of course, he's got his own secrets that he's harboring, and then at the end of the story, they find out each other's secrets and how they're actually linked together. And it might actually end up being a novella versus a short story, but I don't see it being a super long project. And that's it for all my novels. I dabble in poetry a little bit. I've been writing poetry since I was a teenager. Some of it's half decent and some of it is not great. Obviously, I wrote some of them when I was crushing on guys or like ex-boyfriends, so they're more just like, you know, poorly written sob stories after boys. So I'm hoping that as I venture more into poetry as a mature adult, some of this poetry will be a little bit more mature and higher quality as well. But yeah, these are all my writing projects, and so comment down below which one you think sounds most interesting to you, or which one you loved the most. I'm really curious to hear which ones that you think sound the most interesting. And so yeah, I'm like I said, Project t.o.d is supposed to be my main work in progress, but I bounce around back and forth between a lot of them. So I'll do another video later about what my writing goals are, and they'll be more specifically related to Project t.o.d in terms of publishing and stuff like that. But I'm very excited to be writing all of these books and to have finally taken the plunge to do so. And so if you stuck around this long to watch all of this, thank you so much. And I hope you'll stick around for future videos to keep up with my journey of where all this writing is taking me. And so, thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!